welcome everyone. Siemens is big in PLC business, but I'm happy to have here today also Christofer from Apache Software Foundation explaining us PLC4X.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. And I'm really happy that I tasked Claude to find some conferences with a tight relation with industrial automation, but which are also conferences and not sort of like the typical industrial fairs. So I'm really happy to be here in Zug. Today, I'm going to take you on a little journey, a journey that I was having for the last 10 years or so, about Apache PLC4X, but also sort of about the state of open source in industrial automation. So first of all, who am I? Well, my name is Christofer Dutz. I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation. I'm currently serving my third term as one of the 9 directors of the Apache Software Foundation, and I seem to be the guy who's always choosing the tricky times to serve. So I think the last time was when CRA came up, and the Apache Software Foundation had to adjust to that. And now, lucky me, I'm in the middle of a complete turmoil about AI. But the role I'm here at today is sort of like I'm a PMC member of a project called Apache PLC4X. I was the guy who had the luck and joy to do the first commit to this project and sort of like take a project I started to Apache. Since last year, I'm also founder of my own company called ToddySoft. I'm going to be touching that a bit against the end. But I spent something around 10 years full-time. All of my spare time went into Apache PLC4X. I started this whole thing while I was a consultant at a German consultancy called Codecentric. I had the luck that I was able to work on open source full-time for almost 3.5 years. Well, and then came 2020, and I guess a lot of things changed for a lot of us in that year. For me, it was a major break because I was no longer able to contribute full-time. Yeah, so be prepared that this talk is going to become a bit more personal at the end, because it's sort of like a split in the middle, or let's say at the last third. And yes, I like snowboarding and I like electronic music. I think that was a picture taken at the Tomorrowland Winter Festival a few years ago. Was awesome. But I don't recommend snowboarding in a crocodile costume. That just sucks. It looks cool. So what am I going to be talking about? Well, today it's sort of like, admittedly, I haven't heard anybody here mention the word Industry 4.0, but take us back 9 years, and it was sort of like everybody was talking about it. What does that, so there was this picture of Industry 4.0, but there were still some parts missing. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be showing you what Apache PLC4X. But then I'm going to switch, as I said, on reflecting on open source in an area that is absolutely, or at least was absolutely new to open source. And I hope I'm not going to be talking that much, that we'll be having some Q&A at the end, but I was told I'm lucky to be the guy just in front of the lunch break, which is a bit longer. So yeah, I'm also going to be hanging out around here. So spin back 9 years or 10, everything was about Industry 4.0. If you went to the SBS fair in Nuremberg at that time, everybody was selling Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0. But what does that mean? Well, usually people, every slide deck of every consultancy, every slide deck, every ad, everything was about predictive maintenance, overall equipment efficiency, golden batch analysis, digital twins, energy optimization, quality tracking, and traceability. I mean, when I was working at Rivian, I saw how much this traceability actually is. I think you were able to sort of like, if you just have the serial number, you can actually see which screw in that car is tightened with how much torque for every bloody screw in that truck. So traceability, it was mind-blowing, and now, well, we're just sprinkling AI on everything. And all of these things have been promised for almost a decade now, but, well, admittedly, well, if you ask me, there was a lot of talking, but there was very few actually doing. So what were the challenges? Well, at first, it was sold like, well, those are OT challenges. It's about time series data. It's about real time. I mean, real time is my favorite word because I think even in OT, real time, it's sort of like from sub-nanoseconds to, well, 2-digit milliseconds, that's real time. Yeah, don't ask the IT guys because we start talking about real time if it's within seconds, I guess. But yeah, we've got lots of devices. Yeah, we're not talking about connecting 20 computers in your office. It's about connecting 10,000s of vehicles or stuff like that, or production line devices. They speak different protocols. Reliability, I mean, that's one thing. So like in IT, in modern IT, I'd say, well, in the 90s, it was sort of like you build software that it doesn't crash. Today, nobody really cares. Yeah, if it crashes, you just toss away the container and spin up a new one. Problem solved. Don't do that with a production line. They don't like that. Data quality. I mean, I think when I reverse engineered the Delta V protocol, I was mind blown because they didn't just have true or false as a Boolean, but they also had a probability that this Boolean was actually valid. And I thought, well, for an IT guy, a Boolean is just true or false, not with a, but if you boil it down, all of these challenges, they sort of like translate to things that, so like what they actually mean in the IT world. It's about storage. I mean, I think what I've never seen is that it's like on a lot of shop floors, they're collecting time series data in relational databases. And well, all of these databases are completely saturated. You can't really query them very much because then you're taking the production line down. It's about stream processing. It's about distributed systems. It's about analytics, integration, visualization. But for that, we've already had really stable, and I mean, we're not talking about, well, this runs on a server. We're talking about hyperscaler deployments here. Just as an example, because, well, I'm the Apache guy, so Apache comes first. So in storage at Apache, we have IoTDB, which is, from my opinion, the coolest time series database there is. I think we're talking about I think the coolest installation was 1.5 billion insertions of time series values per second. I think it was at a nuclear power plant somewhere in China. Apache Cassandra, everybody knows. InfluxDB, TimescaleDB. For streaming, we have Apache Flink, Kafka, Pulsar. In analytics, well, I don't have to read all of them, but as you can see, there's loads of very well-established open source solutions in the IT world. Now, you might frown a bit because I mean this whole thing is about open source in the industry. Here I'm referring to, let's say, mainstream open source solutions that go beyond, let's say, the Siemens solution. So there is not very much helping me to connect all of that magic in the IT world with the magic that's happening on the shop floor. Now, some people say, well, but OPCOA, and I mean, believe me, 9 years ago, everybody was telling me my open source project had no chance because OPCOA is solving all of the problems there are. Well, I guess most of us know it wasn't that. Yeah, so the missing piece is actually, we've got all this magic IT tools that could solve all of these problems for us, but well, I used to say, well, AI is great, but AI works better if it's got data. And the data lives on PLCs, and these PLCs come from various manufacturers, Siemens, Beckhoff, Rockwell, Mitsubishi, Schneider Electric, what you name them. There are SCADA systems. They sometimes have their own protocols. We have field bus devices. So if you've got like a Profinet or an EtherCAT device that is taking temperature measures somewhere, again, we have proprietary historians. So there is no, let's say, common multi-language way to access the data that is on these machines. And well, thousands of protocols. Um, so an analogy to explain to people what PLC4X actually is I like to take an analogy. So I remember my first student job was in, 1999, 1998. And I remember it was writing a software that had to write data into a relational database. So, well, obviously, I think an Oracle license was something around 100,000 K. So yeah, didn't get that from my boss, but I got MySQL. So I wrote my software against MySQL, but the production database was going to be Oracle. Yeah, so my software was great, and we wanted to roll it out. Well, I had to rewrite 70% of it because, well, the Oracle driver just looked completely different. And we didn't have any JDBC then, but that came. And so what changed with JDBC or ODBC for the folks in the Windows ecosystem was that it was a shared API, and the vendors provided drivers to translate from that shared API to the proprietary solution. And that's sort of like what we were missing. One API to talk to any type of industrial equipment, and providing connection drivers for that. And that is, let's say, the original idea behind Apache PLC4X. Now I introduced to you, and now you might be understanding why I'm the nut job running around with a plush animal. Well, that's Toddy. Toddy is our mascot. He got his name because I was looking for an animal that had a P, an L, and a C in it, in exactly that order. And I remember that regular expression that I ran against all of the animal names was some, well, amoeba. I thought, oh, well, I can't quite identify with something like that. A pelican, I mean, it might be just me, but for me, pelicans are sort of like the assholes of the bird world. But a palm civet, oh yeah, they look cute. Oh, it lives on Java, but also on other islands. Perfect match. And when I heard, well, Toddy is the guy who's making simple coffee to Kopi Luwak, I thought, oh, that's going to be my animal. So that's how Toddy got his name, because I think in the US, they call palm civets toddy cats. So that's how he got his name. So Apache PLC4X is a top-level project at the Apache Software Foundation since 2019. I did the first commit in, I think it was October 2017. It's Apache 2 licensed. And what was very important for me was that it's vendor neutral. I knew at that time, 10 years ago, the industrial automation area wasn't a very friendly place. So I remember my first call with folks from Siemens. I told them what I was planning on doing and said, yeah, well, please go ahead. You're going to hear from our lawyers. I think Schneider did the same and ABB did the same. So it doesn't matter who I called. Most of them, they just threatened to sue me. So I knew I have to go to a foundation to have this legal protection. But I also wanted a neutral, vendor-neutral place. And I knew at that time, let's say, well, some people here in the audience might disagree, but let's say Linux Foundation and Eclipse Foundation are usually places where companies like to bring their projects because they have a bit more influence over the projects there. And I just didn't want that to happen. I wanted it to be completely controlled by the community. And that was what Apache is, let's say, known for. As soon as we noticed that sort of like there's a company executing sort of like undue influence on a project, well, that's when the board of directors steps in and gets out the hammer and just slaps them. So yeah, no platinum membership that buys you a board seat. Believe me, it's a lot of work. And once you get it, all you get is a few beers, perhaps, per year. So what does the PLC4X API consist of? Well, like JDBC, where you don't get all the bells and whistles that you might get from using a native Oracle driver, you sort of live with a reduced set of functionality, but as long as it's 99% of what you need all the time, it's a lot simpler. So that's what we're doing. So we've got an API for discovery. You fire off a discovery, and then you get, let's say, all the Siemens S7 devices on your network. As soon as you found a device, you can browse it. Well, I have to still exclude the Siemens devices here because the S7com old protocol doesn't support that. But let's say a backoff PLC, I can list up which tags are in that, which data types are they, what's the meta information about those tags. Once I have the tags, well, I can read them, I can write them, I can subscribe to changes. I think for the Profinet protocol, I recently even started implementing a publish API. And the cool thing is, the code for accessing any type of PLC, it looks absolutely identical for all major vendors because we're doing the hard work of translating that to what this means for a particular protocol behind the scenes. And, well, some people have already asked me what's the X for at the end. It's not referring to the protocols that we're talking, but I guess you all know log4j, log4net. It's always something for a language. And I wanted PLC4X to be sort of like universal. I know I'm a big Java fan, but I knew, well, I guess the automation industry is probably more going to be into the .NET C# area. All the AI folks are all Python fanboys, I just thought. Well, understanding the protocol is the hard part. So like writing the driver is sort of like just the thing that you have to do. So what we did is we came up with our own protocol specification language because I actually had a look at all of the ones available, and all of them needed sort of like a human in the loop to translate what, well, actually this means. But we came up with a version that is, let's say, we can completely generate the data types, the parsers, the serializers, and all of that. And that just takes away 80 to 85% of the hard work of implementing a new protocol. And for that, we've got templates for various languages. For example, Java, Go, C, Python, or C#. I'm currently working on Rust. So we can sort of like update a protocol specification and instantly all of our protocol drivers adjust. Now we find out, oh, well, this reserved word actually means something. Let's update that, and whoop, all drivers are updated. Currently, we support Siemens S7com, Modbus in all three variants, the backoff protocols, Ethernet IP, OPC-UA, Schneider's UMass, KNixNet IP, BACnet, CANopen, Firmata, and a lot more. I didn't list up all of them because, admittedly, some of them were maintained by some people that just came by, needed that for their device, and then took off. So we might be adding the one or the other driver if there's no support for that. And I should mention that this doesn't mean that all of these protocols are equally supported on all languages, because as I mentioned, we generate 85% of the code. Well, there's still 15 missing. So if there's nobody interested in, let's say, a Firmata driver on Go, well, then we don't have one. But we want to make sure that supported really means something. So if there's nobody behind it, we don't offer it. Not every driver supports every operation. As I just mentioned, let's say the Siemens S7com, the old protocol, doesn't really support browsing. I recently learned, well, that's not 100% true, because if you have Siemens S7 300s or 400s in old firmwares, well, they actually do tell you which data blocks they have inside and how big they are, which I found very interesting. But you can't expect that every feature is available on every PLC. Like Modbus, it doesn't have any tag browsing. It doesn't actually have subscriptions. So our API exposes, as soon as you've got a connection, you can ask it, well, can I actually subscribe here? Well, then with Modbus, it will most certainly say no. If you've got, let's say, a backoff device, it will most probably say yes. But it differs from driver to driver. We can't make things happen that are just not supported. We're trying really hard to support as much as possible, but it's just not possible for everything. A typical use case, let's say if somebody asked me, well, how would you plan a data pipeline to sort of like build a dashboard for my S7 controlled device? Well, usually you have an H gateway, and that's one thing that you need to understand. PLC4X drivers are not meant for being, let's say, installed on a PLC. They are usually always running inside of some IT system. A typical use case would be an edge gateway running PLC4X. It's communicating with the PLC using its native protocol, maybe taking Sparkplug from this binary MQTT format instead of JSON, sending it via an MQTT broker or using Apache Kafka. An Apache IoTDB consumes this data stream, ingests it into some TimeSeries data, and then you use Grafana to build a nice dashboard. That would be sort of like a, now we're able to sort of like do the full stack with 100% open source. So, all's good, right? Yeah, I would have loved to say, yes, all's good, but reflecting on doing open source in the industrial automation for now almost 10 years, it's, yeah, so the important part is what's below the waterline. So one thing that PLC4X was completely different with all the other projects that I've been a contributor to. So I think at Apache, I'm currently a committer at 12 different projects. And one thing is completely different with PLC4X. PLC4X only works if you have the hardware. So you have to have real hardware, PLCs, I/O devices, gateways. Those usually come at a pretty steep price tag. And now that you've got the PLC, it doesn't mean you can get started. No, you usually have to buy some engineering software for it. TIA Portal, I think the TIA Portal Professional, well, if you're not some company with some really good ties with the sales department, well, you're probably around 3.5K, 4K for a license. Protocol specs, they're also not cheap. Well, if they are available, I think I bought them for KNX, for Profinet, and several other ones. And well, sometimes you even need sort of like some equipment to attach to the device because it just doesn't work if you don't attach anything to it. So a mid-range PLC license, I'd say a PLC plus the license for the engineering software, you're easily somewhere in the 2,000 to 8,000 euros area. And a test lab for only one vendor, you easily crack the 20,000 K pretty soon. I think, yeah, sometimes I also needed to buy multiple versions of something. I think my favorite example is the Siemens S7 devices. I think I've got a 300, several 1200s, several versions of 1500s because there's a difference in the firmware, the ones that support the new protocol with TLS, the other ones that don't do without. So you have multiple versions of all of this equipment. And I was giving away this stuff for free for 9 years or so. My hope was to sort of like, or I'm going to go into that. Most hardware vendors, well, they threatened to sue me. Nothing about donations, but notable exceptions were definitely Beckhoff, which sort of like when I called them, oh, sure, that's cool. Oh, I guess you need an engineering environment. Well, that's for free anyway, but you also need a PLC. Well, we'll just ship you one. And here you've got a phone number for someone on speed dial. So if you've got a question, just call him and tell you. Vago, Phoenix Contact were pretty much similar. I recently, I think Christmas 2 years ago, I actually got one of the older S7500s from Siemens, which I really appreciated. But under the line, well, just this open source giving away stuff for free just doesn't scale. I mean, here I took some pictures of, let's say, my test bench. It's a really fantastic discussion opener, this background. So if you're on a call with me, you'll probably have the blinky lights behind me, and it always gets the discussion started. In 2020, I bought myself this Fischertechnik factory because I thought, well, nobody's going to let me touch his factory, so I'll just buy my own factory. And well, a real factory doesn't fit into my office, but Fischertechnik is awesome. So here we go. I think we've got a Vago PLC. Below is the Beckhoff. Then we've got a Siemens and a Rockwell, because I wanted to demonstrate that I can talk to all of this stuff. It escalated a bit, so I've got another Fischertechnik factory with some Bosch Rexroth below it, my energy system that runs SunSpec. I've got some demonstrators from Fartech. Yeah, even I like to call it my office laser. So sometimes when I'm coding at night, I'm listening to electronic music, and electronic music works better with a laser. But now I can talk to that laser and make it draw the images that I want. But yeah, and so the general idea was getting consulting contracts, because I mean, the industry, we can solve all of their problems. So who they're going to call? Well, not me. So I think in 9 years we did several proof of concepts. They were all hugely successful, but only one serious consulting engagement. Every time in the end, when the customer wanted to take it from a proof of concept to a real solution, well, they turned to the big automation vendors with the big names, or the IT consultancies. Well, I guess we all know the big ones, which all have one thing in common. I don't know a single one who contributes back to open source. So all the companies actually investing in open source, they weren't the ones getting the contracts to actually do it. And well, that's why I say at least in Germany, I like to say, well, I guess that might be a reason why a lot of the automation, digitization projects just don't work. Because you got to get the people on board that built the stuff that you're actually using. I tried commercial support because I said, yeah, well, I do understand that if I'm running my factory, if I'm running my steel melting plant on some software, well, if it breaks on Christmas Eve, I want somebody to help me fix that problem. But you can't expect that with open source, because I mean, yeah, every time, well, people seem to expect that because I'm giving it away for free, so I must be willing to sacrifice Christmas Eve. But believe me, I don't. And usually if you get pushy, I usually prioritize your stuff under the carpet. Yeah, so not a single contract. Usually I got answers like, why should I pay? This is open source. And I think in the Eclipse guy mentioned sort of like open source is like, not like free beer, but like a free puppy. At Apache, we like to say open source is free software, not like in free beer, but like in free speech. You get the right and the opportunity to take a part in it, but you can't expect anything from it. Yeah, I tried different things. GitHub sponsors, you can see a few sponsors there, but I know all of them, and they're all Apache folks. And I think that donation from Bytefabrik, they needed, because they're the company behind Apache Stream Pipes, and they needed a new release of PLC4X. And I said, hey, I put up a stretch goal on for a new release, because I said, everybody's asking for new releases. And I said, well, I don't need a new release. You guys need that because you want to integrate that into your products. And building a new release does actually work. So how about you finance that? And I think they just needed a new release. So I got a little donation. Buy me a coffee. That's going to have a story about that. Open Collective, that was sort of like the most successful one, even if it's way from sort of like viable. Created the Friends of Toddy collective. And there it was the idea to sort of like do crowdfunding for things that multiple people wanted, like a new release or supporting the S7COM Plus protocol. So the 013 release, it actually took almost half a year to collect something around 300 euros. And I think one company I knew whose entire commercial product was actually based on my work. I told them, hey, we're just missing 50 bucks. How about you guys donate that? Tumbleweed, nothing happening. Yeah, I got partial funding for the S7COM Plus driver, but still, yeah, it's nice to get a few beers, but it just doesn't work to pay the bills. My favorite story was the $5 story. So somebody said, well, I've got this problem and it needs fixing instantly. I said, yeah, well, that's a problem. It's your problem, but I can make it my problem if you, let's say, leave me a donation. And I sent him the link to buy me a coffee. So he did exactly that. He bought me one coffee. And sort of like, yeah, you probably love PLC4X and your contribution support on this project. Please implement this feature request, blah, blah, blah. And it was like 2 days of work. Yeah. So instead of being mad about that, I'm just making fun of that every time. Yeah. So end of last year, I had to draw the line because 2 years ago, I even had to, so like I closed down my company because, well, if you keep on buying industrial equipment and you're not earning any money, well, the German tax officials don't really like that. They like companies to earn money. So I had to close that down before they close it down for me. But last year, I decided I'm going to try something different. I'm not going to go for consulting. I know the automation industry doesn't know how to consume libraries in general. They've got products and they want commercial products. They want to plug in, they install, and then they can communicate with the stuff. So the idea was to just change the complete mode to keep on paying for the bills. So last year I founded my company, ToddySoft. I guess you might know why I called it ToddySoft. So I wanted to sort of like keep the bound with where we came from. And I also wanted something that isn't sort of like, yeah, I didn't want to call it IoTSoft or IoTware or something like that because it was just so generic. I just thought, well, I think maybe ToddySoft, that might stick a bit. And I'm starting to build commercial products or SDKs. So a lot of companies, they want to sell their new AI dashboard, but the problem is they're not able to communicate with the hardware, but they can't afford implementing it themselves. So they can just buy the SDK from me, get commercial support for it. And yeah, so that's the experiment. Communication drivers are just step one. So I've got a lot of ideas how we can prove things in the automation industry. You can read about that on the website. I just don't want to spoil it too much. I just wanted to show the implications of the industry not giving anything back. So the new model, well, what's happening with Apache PLC4X? Absolutely nothing. It's staying Apache 2.0. It stays at the ASF. I'm keeping on maintaining it. I think I'm still contributor number one. We keep the broad driver set, so nothing's going away. Community contributions are still as welcome as always. But me, for my work, let's say, enterprise-ready stuff goes into the commercial offering first. They're under a commercial license, usually sold as binaries. I provide support and SLAs for that, and that money goes into funding the lab and all of the stuff that I need to keep on going. Reduced functionality usually comes back to the project. Like I think the Schneider UMass protocol that I recently implemented, well, the full set of all stuff is in the commercial offering, but the open source project also gets basic communication options. It's sort of like the Red Hat Fedora Confluent Kafka approach. Yep, on top, let's say I currently implemented a first really fully working Profinet or EtherCAT drivers for Atlas Copco. I don't know if you know those. It's sort of like a screwdriver that sort of like you can tell how much torque it should apply, and it also measures how much torque it applied and feeds it back. So that's for the automotive, marine, and aerospace sector, very important. Loads and loads and loads of drivers in the background, but also, let's say, I want to make more and more drivers emulate stuff. Like, as I mentioned, Modbus doesn't support subscriptions, but it doesn't mean we can't offer that API. We can pull in the background and emulate change of state subscriptions, so it's easier and easier to use. And I'm doing a lot of testing, so as I mentioned, what does that mean for PLC4X users? Well, actually nothing. The thing is that probably the most special things go into my commercial offering first, and later on into the open source project. But what I want to say is this allows me to keep contributing to PLC4X because of my business and not despite of it. I really hope that I'll now have less burnout, because believe me, if you've got a full-time job and it's stressing you out, and after hours you're working till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning trying to resolve issues in the community, well, that works for 1 to 9 years, but after that you really get worn out. So yeah, well, now I'm working 16 hours a day, but at least it's fun now. And I can finally, hopefully, afford to just buy the hardware and not have to crawl to the vendor. So like, please, please, please give me something. Yeah. In the past, when I said 2020, there was a big impact on the community, because till then I was able to, let's say, I always said working on an open source project is like 1/3 coding, 1/3 PR, going to conferences, speaking to people, encouraging the community, mentoring, stuff like that. Yeah, and 1/3 doing sales, trying to sell the offering. And I wasn't able to do that, and all of the coding was just done by me. I just had to drop all of the other parts. And I guess you all know 2020 was challenging for many. Many people changed jobs. Many of our existing contributors changed jobs where PLCs no longer mattered. So they're still hanging around, but they're not actively contributing as much as they were before. And I really hope that this will change over time again. Right now, I'm by far the most active contributor, but we just need more and more people. So I have a small ask to you guys here. And that was why I was really anxious about speaking here, because I know, well, in the past I was speaking at IT conferences, and there are IT folks in there, and they just don't have any OT equipment. So I'm like preaching to the wall. But I hope here maybe some of you folks think maybe this is something worth actually supporting. The best thing that you could do, because for me, I always said open source, especially at an open source foundation like Apache, provides a level playing field where even competitors can work on something together that they all need, but which is not, let's say, the essential offering of any company. So I guess two car manufacturers, they all sell cars, but they don't sell protocol drivers, but they all need protocol drivers. So why don't car manufacturers send some people to work on open source to make this whole ecosystem better that each one can profit from? So that would be my absolute favorite outcome. People showing up on our mailing lists and saying, hey, I've got some feedback, I've got some equipment, I've got some people. That would be my favorite. Contributing hardware, well, that's also awesome. I think when I'm coming back home, there must be a package from Schneider sitting there, so that's going to be fun. You could, if sort of like, I know that in the automation industry, there is just not, they don't have senior software engineers just waiting there to be donated for something. But they sometimes have money, so you could sort of like hire somebody to implement a feature that you would love to see. You could sponsor things via the Open Collective. Just allocate budget for open source. I think the first talk of the day was about sort of like at Siemens, and the thing with the license costs 0. I was biting my fingers. So should I ask what was the budget for contributing to upstream projects? So allocate a small budget for actually supporting the open source projects that you need, because like in that XKCD comic, it is way more true than you think. There are so many essential parts in open source that just some guy in Nebraska is doing because weather's shitty. But if that guy goes away, well, you've all got a problem. Yeah. Well, or now brand new, go to ToddySoft and buy our stuff. So what's like the outlook on PLC4X? Well, I'm currently working on a new SPI rewrite. That's 3 letters, but it actually means rewriting all of our Java drivers. And the only reason I can do that is because I got funding from NLnet. And so we did some design decisions 5 years ago when we built the SPI2. That we decided, oh, well, going for Netty because Netty is known for being awesome for building stuff like that. Well, it wasn't. Especially if you've got stuff like raw sockets or serial connections, it really gets messy there. So I'm currently, the new SPI will be dependency free, which is also a big aspect for CRA compliance. I mean, I think the Modbus driver pre-SPI 3 was something around 15 megabytes. Now we're below 1 because we just don't have all of this legacy dependencies that we pull in. Multi-transport connections, yeah. I had to build that because we were stuck with Profinet because Profinet needs 4 parallel connections, 2 via UDP, raw socket connections on Ethernet frames and stuff like that. It's just nothing that worked in the old architecture. I hope as soon as funding's finished, I'll be able to provide a first version of the SCalvin.com Plus protocol. And, well, I'm also trying to make this more sustainable, not just for me, but for all the other people contributing to this project. So, thank you for listening, and I was just 5 minutes above my schedule. I think we still have 4 minutes and 3 seconds for questions. So, if you want to contact me, if you want to contact the project, that would be most awesome. Contact me via my company. That would be second awesome. And yeah, got the contact information here. And any questions? Thanks.
Yes, I have a question. So you mentioned CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, and there's also a regulation that we need to get rid of unencrypted protocols, right? So for BACnet IP, we have BACnet SC. Then, for instance, how does this affect PLC4X?
Yeah, well, let's say the hard work is probably what the automation vendors will be having to do because we can't well, we're now going to just encrypt Modbus. Well, the only thing that will happen, that nothing works anymore. So I think there's Modbus, more and more devices that support TLS over Modbus. The S7Com Plus protocol, Siemens decided to shove TLS somewhere in between some of the many layers. Thank you for that. It made my life miserable for a long time. Beckhoff runs via secure AMF, or AMS runs through a TLS secured layer. So more and more protocols are switching to TLS-enabled versions. And, well, we're doing our best to support those. Usually, well, the new encryption is supported on the new devices, and the new devices have the big price tags, and the big price tags aren't the things that we can't afford. So right now, most probably, I will still buy them, but the TLS support will most probably be in the commercial offering first to mainly pay for the work and the hardware that I have to get.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think it's a valid business model. By the way, I worked in a company, what to be aware of or careful about. I work in a company that also open source as Apache on Apache 2.0 license our product. With limited feature set, what happened at some point, some third-party companies started offering commercial support for our product a bit cheaper. And then the license had to be changed to something else. I don't know if this is a risk in your case, but this is what happened to our product basically. And adding commercial features like what you probably have in your code, the commercial code, and we had in our product, they started adding it to basically cloned repository.
Yeah, in general, that is a risk. But I know, like reverse engineering the secure AMS protocol, that was tricky. And I think I'm still one of the only people who did it. So I'm still keeping the crown jewels a bit hidden. But let's say I would have loved, so like if now I could do, my favorite option would be to like do everything open source and live from the support contracts. But as that wasn't happening, I just had to flip to sort of like, well, now you have to open your purse first. And I just hope we're not going to have that problem.
And the second question, because what you showed, it doesn't seem illegal. Why they threatened to sue you? Was it because of the reverse engineering or something else?
Well, it is sometimes a bit tricky. For example, I think if I was in the US, reverse engineering a Rockwell protocol there is actually illegal. But if you're in Europe, the European law overrules the corporate law, so they can write into their license agreements whatever they want. But I think a lot of the big companies, they really like to threaten the small contributors because, well, I know that, let's say if Siemens pulled it through and they shoved 50 lawyers into a courtroom and dragged me there. Well, first of all, I have to deal with a mess of a lawsuit. I have to pay for a lawyer, and it doesn't really matter if I win or lose. I lose a lot of my patient's lifetime, and I probably come out of it with white hair. So yeah, a lot of the stuff is things the big companies would like to be enforceable, which is not. And I think another thing is, technically, I think it's even forbidden in Germany to use Wireshark. So the first reverse engineering stuff we did was at Codecentric, we had a finca on Mallorca. On Mallorca, using Wireshark is not forbidden.
Okay.
It was a great argument to say, oh, well, we have to go to the finca. Yeah, that was fun. Any other questions or all just hungry?
Thank you for sharing your story and super interesting. I would be super curious with your new setup and the company. Have you seen their success already in the sense of more than the one support contract you previously had? So are people coming to you pretty much?
Yeah. To be absolutely transparent with this, I think I've got my company now for 9 months. And I've earned absolutely zero. But it's not because there wasn't any interest. I'm starting with a Beckhoff ADS plugin for inductive automation ignition because there is a huge demand on that. But the thing is, and we're doing beta tests, and now all the legal stuff that you have to deal with, all of that stuff is now finally finished, and we're ending the beta phase. And what I feel a bit like, and I keep on saying, it feels like having an Apple store on the day before selling the next iPhone, 10 years ago. So then there was a thing, people were camping there. It feels a bit like that. So there are really, let's say, the largest US companies who actually are threatening to sign the contract. So I am hopeful that I will be able to pay for some new toys in the near future. But if I've learned one thing with the industrial automation area is don't pop a bottle of champagne before the contract is signed.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much,
Thanks for having me.
Christofer.